Let's then move to our first session here this morning. Copped Enough, as many of you will be aware, launched on the 1st of May. This nationwide campaign addresses the urgent need for fair pay and better conditions, with police pay down 21% in real terms since 2010. Officers are at breaking point. You don't need me to tell you guys that. We have a great panel to talk about this. With us, John Partington, Acting National Secretary of the Police Federation, Brian Booth, Acting Deputy National Chair, and Gareth Nicholson, Head of Comms and Marketing with the Police Federation. Welcome to our panel. Before we begin, let me just remind you as well, we are running a poll on this. If you can join us using the instructions shown on the screen, submit your question in your own time as well. The poll is this. Which issue do you think is most urgent to address in improving police working conditions? And there is a choice of 4 answers there: low pay and a lack of fair rises, long hours and poor work-life balance, inadequate mental health and well-being support, or unsafe staffing levels and rising workload. I'm sure a lot of you could answer and tick all of those responses, but on balance, what do you see as the issue that is most urgent to address? Follow the QR codes, and if you're watching online, you can follow the instructions there. So welcome to John, Brian and Gareth. Lots to get through here. John, let's start with you on this. Let's get an overview, if we can, of the kind of police budget, what it costs to pay officers. There are some really eye-watering figures here. I don't think anybody is in doubt. 17.5 billion, 10 billion on police pay. So for every 1% pay rise, that would cost £100 million. Now, you're asking for a 21% degradation to be rectified. Is that even affordable, John?
Yeah, so you're right. So when we listen to the politicians, you hear some big numbers being mentioned for the police budget. You're right, 17.5 billion. But obviously within policing, we don't need to invest in certain medical equipment. We don't need to buy expensive tanks. So a lot of that money does go on police pay. That's £10 billion across England and Wales on police officer pay. So when we're asking the government for these rises, it is for every 1%, we need to ensure that the government put £100 million into the policing budget. Otherwise, the service itself will then suffer. So when we're looking at the 21%, it is a big ask. Because you're asking for a lot of money to be put into the system. But the evidence that we've submitted to the peer review body this time, we've not asked for a single figure. What we've done is we've taken a slightly different approach. And what we've done is we've tried to look at some of the problems within the budget and where some of the maybe savings could be made. One key issue at the moment is the retention of officers. There are some recruitment problems, in particular in London, but retention is a key issue at the moment. And when we looked into this a little bit further, what we found is that it's costing around £2 billion a year to recruit and recruit and train those officers. Now, some of that would obviously be needed because there's obviously always some natural turnover. But when we've looked into it a little bit more, some of the data has changed significantly over the last few years.
Mm-hmm. So what has changed? What are those fundamental changes that have altered the terms of the argument, if you like?
So retirements used to be the main reason that people left the police service. It was generally seen as a 30-year career. Some people did a little bit less. Some people did a little bit more, depending on the circumstances. So you go back to 2012, around 1,000 people left the police service voluntarily every year. You move forward to 2024, we're now looking at over 5,000 people leaving voluntarily every year. And that number is steadily creeping up. So the trend's increasing all the time. And our prediction is that if nothing's done about this, by 2027, we could be looking at 10,000 people leaving voluntarily every year. And the most worrying part of that, 2/3 of those people who leave by their own free will, not by retirement, are actually in the first 5 years of service.
So there's an obvious manifest impact on this. In terms of what that means then for police officers, just give us a kind of an overview of that, the impact on individuals, what you're hearing.
Well, ideally you want a balance of skills and experience across the police service because that's healthy. You know, you have younger officers and more senior officers and mid-service officers. But the rate of turnover at the moment simply isn't sustainable. So you go back to 2016, there were around 14% of officers who were actually under who are actually under 5 years of service. Now, some of that would have been down to the austerity years, and that figure was probably quite healthy from an experience point of view. But you move forward to today, and now we've got over 35% of officers under 5 years of service. So when we look at the government's agenda, which is increasing neighbourhood policing, dealing with complex crime, we don't think there's simply the skills and experience to kind of deliver that government agenda. And we think that's letting the public down. And then when you look at this £2 million, we think that's also letting the taxpayer down. And from a frontline policing perspective, there's a lack of experience out there at the moment, and experience seems to be something that's continually undervalued in policing.
Yeah, and we're now waiting for the government response on this, right?
Yep.
That's the kind of state of play
Yes.
so far. What solutions have you suggested, John, to help try and fix this issue?
So we're saying, look at that £2 billion, and we're saying use some of that to look at the pay that police officers have, use some of that money to try and retain police officers. We've also asked for some other things as well. The constables' pay points, we've asked for 2 of those to be removed, which would more align them with teachers and nurses. That would mean that some newer officers who are potentially leaving the service can get to the higher pay points more quickly, which may retain them. But also senior leaders need to do their job as well, because at the moment officers are feeling undervalued, unsupported, and they're simply burnt out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of weird reality, isn't there, of maybe it's politicians or just the way governments seem to work, but in opposition, politicians talk a really good talk. They're your best friend. They're going to solve everything. There's not a problem out there they're not going to address for you. And then, of course, they become the government, no matter what party it is, and the reality is very different.
Yes. Yeah, and we're seeing that all the time. I mean, I think they were in opposition. I think they were very much looking at solving the problems. But I think now that they're in power, obviously they take on a lot more responsibility. But obviously they face the challenges. So you get the promises in opposition and then the fight when they come into government. Sure.
Huge bureaucratic area, this. Are there any other parts of this whole discussion that can be, where changes can be made?
Yeah, so police regulations are quite complex. So when we were given the pay review body, I don't think they've fully thought through how complex the arena is because it's governed by legislation. So to change things in police regulations that affect officers' conditions of service takes a long time.
Yeah.
It's quite complex. So what's happened at the moment, the Police Consultative Forum that was set up to deal with these other areas has become quite isolated, ineffective, inefficient. So what we're asking for is that consultative forum to be put back under the remit of the pay review body and a pay review body member to lead it. That would result in hopefully quicker decision making around regulations. And just to give a few examples, the part-time audit to make sure part-time officers are treated fairly under police regulations was started in 2012. We're hoping that that will be completed this year, 13 years later. The Children and Families Act from 2014, that still needs to be written into police regulations. That's 11 years late. And the regulations affecting inspecting ranks was agreed back in 1994 with no review. So 31 years later, there hasn't been a review on those regulations in the change, and the policing landscape now is completely different.
Well, we're going to come back to some more points, John, in a few moments. Brian Booth is also with us. Morning to you, Brian. Good to see you.
Morning.
Just talk about plans then on building alliances, if you like. In terms of the Federation, you know, there are other elements to the policing family, of course. Are you utilising that and building those relationships?
Absolutely, and it's something that's been established over many years with the Federation. We've got some great colleagues nationwide in other staff associations. So we have the British Federation for the Police Federation Northern Ireland, Scottish Police Federation, the Superintendent Association, Defence Police Federation, Civil Nuclear Federation, BTP Federation, and there'll be ones that I've missed there, and they're going to give me a kick in when I meet them next time. But we are stronger together, and what's not surprising, Ian, is when you speak to these areas of policing and our wider policing family, is they are all suffering exactly the same. So being together makes a stronger family union, and I can tell you now there is great support for COPT enough from these associations.
Yeah, and it's vital, isn't it, to build all of that. Do you sense that that's not really happened in this way before? That the opportunity hasn't really been exploited in the way it should do?
I think all of these associations speak for their members on their own particular terms, but I think, like I said, Ian, the strength is us and the unity coming together. All our membership all the people that's involved in these associations, and also the political reach, because each of these organisations have different access to different political avenues.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely important that we exploit every avenue to get the best for us members.
I mean, it's interesting, just on that point, obviously the Federation is politically neutral, but nonetheless, you look at where you need to build relationships. You look at Reform UK, for example. They didn't exist 5 minutes ago. They've only got 5 MPs. They're projected to be the next government. I mean, that's an interesting one to navigate, isn't it?
It's really interesting, but the thing is, what we have to remember, the Federation are apolitical. We don't align to policies of individual parties, but it's so important that we influence those positive policies for policing. I mean, that's a bit of a tongue twister in itself, isn't it?
Did well.
Yeah. But we've got to absolutely work to the best in politics. So if Reform are going to be part of a stronger part of the government in 2028, and we need to get in now, and start forming those relationships and making sure that our voice is heard across the spectrum of politics.
Yeah. And in terms of local branches, what role do local branches play in really amplifying this message, as it were?
I think it's really important that we all have a part to play here. We as a federation will go into Westminster and bang that drum for the members, but it is so important that the members take part as well. I mean, I don't want to steal Gareth's thunder because he's going to be talking about probably the digital picket line, and people are wondering what that's about, but we don't have the ability to take industrial action. So how do we show the strength of feeling through the country, through our families, through our friends, through our communities? It's about coming together and, again, strengthening unity. And our job is to try and bring it all together. So just by signing the digital picket line, asking your kids, grandparents, sisters, brothers, neighbours, anyone in the pub to sign this digital picket line will send a very clear message to Westminster that police officers are not on their own. We are together. We all have a part to play, and I would really ask anyone watching this or viewing this or present here in the audience, please take part in the digital picket line. It means so much.
Yeah, and we're going to hear more about that, I think, now. Gareth Nicholson, Head of Comms and Marketing here at the Police Federation. Morning to you, Gareth. Nice to see you. I mean, there is a lot to get into on this. Clearly, this has taken up an awful lot of time at the moment, for all the good reasons. Getting that message out there to a wider audience, I guess.
It is, Ian, and my job is, in a way, much easier than JP and Brian, because they have to do the detail. They have to do the fine points of detail. We campaign in poetry. We campaign in big pictures. We campaign in tabloid. And it's something that we, as a team, have been really proud and excited to deliver for the Fed. Copped enough, what the police take home is criminal. That's our campaign. Why copped enough? We feel that previous campaigns we've run, and we haven't run a national campaign like this for about 10 years now, so cuts have consequences, was the last one. That campaign was very much warning about what was to come, a warning about the future if the path was taken. This campaign is saying that path has been taken, and it's broken a service, and it's breaking people. So Copped Enough says we are beyond the breaking point. What the police take home is criminal is the subhead of the campaign, and that double meaning of take home is really important there, because this campaign is about pay. It's about fair pay, it's about pay restoration, but it's also about the trauma, the workload, the demand, the unceasing demands made on police officers and their families every day, every shift. And we want to get that across as well in this campaign. You can boil the campaign down in a nutshell. You can't have safe communities without enough police, but you can't have enough police if poor pay is driving them away. That is the message that's behind this campaign. We've taken inspiration from a wide range of sources. So on the issue of pay restoration, the junior doctors, they obviously took strike action at the tail end of the last government. Their focus was entirely on pay restoration. It was signalling what pay degradation looked like and saying we need that back. Very, very simple. No nuance, no room for fudge, no room for compromise. A very, very straightforward message for their members. We've taken a lot of inspiration from that. Royal College of Nursing. We are getting challenged every day with an affordability argument, with government and their bag carriers and their followers in the media saying, well, you may have a case, but we simply can't afford this. The public finances won't stand for it. The Royal College of Nursing, in their action and their campaigning, were very clear, saying when you hear the government say, we can't afford this, we're going to tell you that we can't afford not to do this. So the database case that we're making to say that if we're going to lose 10,000 officers a year to resignation by 2027, which on current trends looks likely, that's going to cost £10 billion over 5 years to attract, recruit, train, kit up all those new recruits that are going to be needed. You can't build a service like that. You can't fix a bucket that's leaking. So we've taken inspiration from that campaign. And finally, a really visceral, in-your-face campaign from our colleagues in Western Australia. So their campaign focused very much on the experience of being a police officer, the assaults, the injuries, the trauma carried. We want to make that an active part of our campaign. We don't want to use actors and actresses for that. We want to use real police officers. So there will be an ask at the end for people who want to come forward and tell their stories. We're really keen on hearing that. Campaign objectives, I'll go through that quite quickly, but number one is to shift that dial on public support for a fair pay rise for police officers. We've got to get the public on our side. It can't just be an argument about us pointing at ourselves. Secondly, we do need an opportunity to galvanise and mobilise our membership, the 140,000 people across the country whose voice together is really powerful. And we talk about elections turning, sometimes on a few thousand votes spread across the country. When government understands that 140,000 police officers, their families, their friends, near on 1 million people, you could make the argument, are all united behind one vision, that's a very powerful lobby. And finally, we need advocates. We need to generate that broad political advocacy across Parliament in favour of better terms and conditions. But we also need the visible and loud advocacy from chiefs and police and crime commissioners, and that part of it is more difficult than the broad political advocacy, but that's a challenge we're taking on. We are a database campaign. It's really important to us that the campaign is based on data. So we commissioned some national polling at the start of this year. And that told us some things that we already knew, and for people watching today, they'll already know that. There's a relatively low level of satisfaction with frontline policing, and that's based on a comparison to other high-trust occupations. So as an example, the levels of satisfaction with frontline policing is lower than the levels of satisfaction with GP services. And for those of you who've had trouble booking a GP appointment, that might be hard to comprehend, but that's the fact. That's what's come out in the polling. But that's entirely driven by a low level of satisfaction with police visibility. People feeling that they're not getting the policing that their council taxes are paying for, and certainly a feeling from officers that they're not able to do the policing that they want to be resourced to do. The really important and unique thing about this polling, for the first time we asked the public how much they think police officers get paid. And when we talk about a 21% pay degradation, the public already overestimates police pay by about £3,000 at the first spinal point of a PC salary. So they've already given us a 10% pay rise in their minds. So actually the argument is much easier to come across than you might think. The really important bit for us here is when we ask the public, do you support an above-inflation pay rise? 28% agreed, nationally represented polling. But that increases by up to 15% when we use emotional stories, powerful stories, when people hear about how dangerous the job is, not every now and then, not on a really bad day, but every moment in every shift, that exposure to danger, that exposure to trauma. That's a real driver of positivity and good feeling. So the campaign in itself, I'm going to share some of the collateral, and you'll see colleagues who are here today will see it around the building. We are using kind of double-sided graphics. So every graphic, this is an example, will have an image of a police officer on duty and then an image of that same police officer at home with the family, showing that juxtaposition between the working life and the family life and the often very blurred line between the two. That's content that will be going out on social media, on digital ad boards, in print, and across national mainstream media. Some very, very clear demands of government in this campaign, and here's where the kind of big picture, broad brushstrokes we can paint. Number one, restore police pay. No ifs, no buts, restore police pay. It's not our job to tell you how, it's not our job to tell you by when, but this is the demand. Number two, stop the mass exodus of experienced officers. Better support for retention, better support for career development, better support for care and welfare, and improve officer safety. So we want to talk about single crewing. We want to talk about the awful tragedy of police officer suicide, which is sadly a growing trend. That's very key for us. It's absolutely clear, some very clear demands of government. And then in terms of the tactical execution around the campaign, it launched on the 1st of May, so it launched to mark International Workers' Day, marking a group of people who aren't necessarily recognised as workers, who aren't necessarily recognised with the same rights afforded to other workers across the country. We launched a video, which is on our YouTube channel, to mark the 10th anniversary of Theresa May's speech to the Federation Conference, where she accused us of crying wolf. She said that we were scaremongering. And our message in that video was, well, we were right then to make those warnings, and do you know what? We're right now. We've got that digital advertising going live next week, and that will be on ad boards in towns and cities and transport hubs around the country. We've also got some print advertising, so targeting politicians, so in The Spectator, The New Statesman, The House magazine, which is the in-house parliamentary magazine as well. And that digital picket line, and Brian said he didn't want to steal my thunder, but he joyfully did. That's a really important part of it for us. And we've had the challenge to us to say, well, what does that matter? Well, the Royal College of Nursing, the junior doctors, all recognise that coalescing public support was an important factor in their campaign. And to some extent, those campaigns were successful. The picket line is an opportunity for us to do two things. Number one, demonstrate that if police officers can't strike, who's going to stand up for them? And number two, to generate that public, political and police family support. Now, we've got 20,000 signatures so far, really good start. But I'm not happy with that. We need 50,000, we need 100,000, we need 200,000. We need to get up as high as we can so we can land that on number 10 Downing Street and say, you've got to change course. Lots of proactive news pieces. Getting media coverage is really important, so we've done really well on that. But we've got more to follow on the doubling of police forces allowing officers to take secondary employment. So that figure's doubled in the last 5 years. Some work on the fact, which I don't think is widely known, that officers have to put their hands in their own pockets to pay for rehab, and a request for the production companies that make quite a lot of money making police documentaries, using you and using your work as part of that. They make profits from that, or shouldn't they put some of those profits into supporting those police treatment centres and Flint House? We'll be making that ask later on this summer. And of course, when the government gives that pay award, some significant public activity, but an awful lot of member engagement activity as well. So we'll be coming to all of you saying, do you accept, do you reject this pay award? Now, it's a pay award, it's not a pay offer, but we think, as the same as the Royal College of Nursing did, that's really important for us. The coverage that we've got so far, lots of media coverage, so national tabloids, national broadsheets. I'll just flick through a little bit of it there. Some really good on-the-day responses from the spending review, where we got on the PM programme on Radio 4. Lots of work on LBC, and if you're a presenter of a talk station, which, Ian, I'm sure you have some knowledge of,
yep,
you're never short of a call from a police officer or a retired police officer.
Yeah.
They're always very keen to give their views, and they've been doing that for us, and that's been really helpful. Telegraph front page in the weekend before the spending review, so there's some really good coverage there. And Tiff had a really strong comment piece in the Times. Again, making that case, making those warnings. Lastly, and really importantly, we cannot carry this campaign. We cannot keep it alive. And it's not a 1-month campaign. It's not a 6-month campaign. This is a years and years campaign. This is about the next 5 years of our existence. We can't keep that campaign alive without stories, without your energy, your passion, your history, what you've done. We've got some really good content already from that. So on our social media, on our website, lots of stories from colleagues telling us about how policing is affecting them, how the lack of fair pay, the cost of living crisis is affecting them. We not only want you to share that online, we want you to lend your voice to that story, to tell us your experience. And we also would like you to sign the virtual picket line, to ask colleagues, ask friends, ask family to do likewise. Because the more that we can do that, the more that we can get across that this is a public campaign with huge public support, the better we'll be, the more chance we have of being successful. I hope I've got across the extent to which we're really passionate and energetic and proud of doing this on your behalf. I can't overstate how much that is. We're massively proud of doing this work for you.
Good work, Gareth. Thank you for that very thorough stuff. I'll come back to John in a second just on some of the finances thing. We've got about 5 minutes left of this session, but Brian and Gareth touched on it there, the mental health issues of officers, just the overarching impact, cost of living crisis, conditions as well as pay. I mean, it's a pretty huge area, and sadly it's growing, that problem.
It's awful, Ian. And when I go out and speak to my colleagues, my mates, who are all in policing, it's harrowing to listen to how much work they're expected to manage and how much lack of support exists within the service. And we all used to have the opportunity to look after each other. in many ways. You know, we had police canteens, we had police bars and stuff for those that are probably a bit older in service, where we kind of helped each other along through these horrible incidents officers attend. And that kind of went over time through cuts, and what we're left with, officers actually carrying that burden back to the family. And what we see, and sadly, you know, Gareth talks about, we are doing a piece of work trying to collate. Richie Murray's helping us from the National Board. His campaign is to try and get a change in the health and safety legislation. And that's about recording properly suicide rates within policing. Sadly, like Gareth said, we've seen it raise exponentially, and we've had a couple over the last few weeks, and it's harrowing. Not just for the families, obviously, it's for the colleagues that are left behind, and, you know, the stations are devastated. But this is a growing trend, and we need to get down to the bottom of why it's happening and what interventions we might, as a federation, be able to assist with. But until we get that accurate data, we really can't see how big a problem it is and how we can get them proper, you know, strategic interventions put in place. What about work around broken families? I mean, if you look at any station, it's probably a place where broken families is probably being not helped by the police work itself. You know, the demand, the staying on after shifts, going home a bit grumpy, perhaps taking it out on the wrong person. But it leads to those horrible divorces, which are costly to police officers. And at what point do we start recording that kind of information? So that's perhaps a piece of work we may look into do later on, because it's all part of the bigger picture of why cops are saying, I've had enough and I'm leaving.
Just a final point, John, on, I mean, the finances of all of this. We all saw the Chancellor stand up a couple of weeks back with a spring statement, spending here, spending there, and I'm sure everybody waiting around going, where's the police bit? Come on, it's coming, it's coming. But it kind of didn't.
No, so the police side of the peer review bodies, there's the National Crime Agency as well, they have now submitted their reports into the government, so the recommendations are with the government, but it was later than the rest of the peer review bodies. So that should be coming out shortly. Generally, the government did ask for all these recommendations to be brought forward, and so that they could report on them earlier. Generally, they were done the week before the summer recess, and that's the indication that we're being given at the moment, that we'll get that report from the government.
Overarchingly, are you hopeful? Because, I mean, everything between you guys, what you've said this morning, Gareth and Brian and yourself, John, I mean, these are not just persuasive arguments. I mean, this is a reality we're talking about here. We're not talking about a little kind of side dish profession of our country. It's policing. I mean, this is massive.
I think the concern for me is I've always thought that the peer review body are more swayed towards the submission from the National Police Chiefs Council, and their recommendation was lower. They're saying it was 3.8%, but that would be if there was extra funding available, and the government have made it clear that there's no extra funding available. So I'm a little bit concerned that they may sway towards the Police Chiefs Council, because we know that some of them haven't even budgeted for 2.8%. So there's going to be further strain on the police system over the next 2 years.
Listen, gents, thank you very much indeed. Before we finish, let's have a look at the results of that poll that we asked a little earlier. The question was, which issue do you think is most urgent to address in improving police working conditions? At the top there, low pay and a lack of fair, do we say raises or rises?
Raises.
Raises. That might be American.
Rises would be RI.
True enough. 55%, understandably, 41% saying unsafe staffing levels and a rising workload. Long hours and poor work-life balance, 2%. Inadequate mental health and well-being support, 2%. Thank you to everybody who voted on that. And thank you, John, for coming on. Great to have you with us, John Partington, Acting National Secretary, Police Federation. Brian, thank you, sir. Good to see you again. Brian Booth, Acting Deputy National Chair. And, of course, Gareth. Thank you, Gareth. Gareth Nicholson, Head of Comms and Marketing at the Police Federation. Thank you to our panellists.